All right, I'd like to call this Resource Conservation Commission meeting to order on Monday, October 12th at 6:38. First order of agenda is to appoint a timekeeper. Diane, would you be the timekeeper this evening?
I certainly will, but we're starting 10 minutes late, so I can't take I'm not taking responsibility for that.
Sure. Well, the agenda is not too packed, so I feel like we'll have some good quality discussions tonight. We'll try to keep on task, but if we stray a couple minutes past, we'll be okay. But let's move on to number 2, public appearances of non-agenda items. I know that there's one or more items to discuss. Gabriella, do you want to introduce our guest?
Yeah, I'll actually have Jonathan go ahead and talk. I know he has a property stormwater issue that's of great concern to a lot of neighbors in the area. And so I think that's what he's going to speak to, but go ahead and introduce yourself, Jonathan. You're muted, Jonathan.
You'd think I'd know that by now, living my life on these meetings. Sorry about that. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else is here to talk about the issues, so I guess if not, then I'll kind of be here as the face to represent the neighborhoods to the south of McKee Farms Park. I know the people directly across from me wanted to be here, but one of them had surgery today, and so they figured no presence is probably better than a drug-induced presence. I want to speak for all the people to the south, but sort of uphill and downhill from the Lacey Road area down to or north to Sherrill Drive and possibly even beyond that. But we have storm water, we have sump water, coming from top and bottom. Even in the dry spell that we had this summer, our sump pumps were working pretty hard. So, and then that translates in the winter to ice in the streets and the gutters and driveways and everything. So our sort of collective concern is, what can the city of Fitchburg do to help us in this situation? And I think that the problem is kind of twofold. There's surface water and how to get that flowing through the properties off to the street or the ponds in McKee Park, where it should be, rather than stopping just short, as it does in the case of my property. It stops one property short of the street and it just slows down and kind of trickles to the next where it stops even more. So that's kind of the first problem. The second part of the problem is the water underneath of us and us dealing with that. So in that case, I guess there's concern about what might be happening underground that we can't see with, our homes, our foundations and our slabs and all of that. And then as that water gets pumped out year round, all the time, that water goes either to other properties. People just have it go to their backyard and it just kind of goes to the flow just like rainwater, or it goes out to the street and is constantly running down the gutter. Personally, I redirected mine. We just bought the house a year ago, May, and one of the very first things I did was reroute my discharge to the front of my house, and I have a pipe across my yard going right to a storm drain above ground. I looked into getting that buried last year, and I got the permit approved by the city, and I found out how much it would cost and the size of the pipe required for a portion of that, and I never did it. I wanted to tap into the back of that storm sewer and just go right directly into it instead of going into the street. So personally, I would like to learn more about that. I know Gabriella was looking into it, but the 8-inch pipe requirement, I believe it was 33 feet from the center of the street, which by my rough measurement was about 15 feet into my yard, had to be 8-inch pipe, which is twice the width as a normal buried sump discharge pipe. I know several people in my immediate area, I should say, recently have had theirs rerouted out to the street. And I know that has brought some relief to certain homes as far as surface water goes. Some properties are virtually unable to use a decent portion of their back lot, their backyards, because it's just a marsh. And I know if it's very rainy, ours is the same way, especially in late spring when the ground is still frozen. Unfortunately, that's where my shed is. So if I need to get to my shed or get my mower out, it's going to be a mess, even if I don't want to do anything in that part of my yard. So that water is water that comes from all the way up the hill and just kind of lands in my yard. It stops the flow. It's the same across the street from me, even worse. And they get it really, really bad with ice on the street. So it gets to the street, but it doesn't even have anywhere to go from there. So that's kind of the gist of the problem. They were at our meeting, whenever that was, a couple weeks ago. We had several people on the call, but there were even more people who expressed interest and concern who just didn't make the call for whatever reason. So I know there's a lot of homes affected by this. And I don't know as if we necessarily know the solution, because we don't necessarily know how big the problem is, or especially with the groundwater and all of that. But that's kind of the piece. I'm happy to, answer questions or share more information if you need. And I'm sure we can provide more, testimonials from other residents as well.
And for context, the Dana Jacobs came and spoke several meetings ago. She's in this immediate area, same as Jonathan. And yeah, there's widespread issues in that area that are intersecting and extensive. So it's definitely a conversation. I know it's been brought up to RCC before, but thank you, Jonathan, for coming to talk a little bit about it, because I think it's really important to have these conversations on the public record. And for any of the RCC committee members that want some insight into the full scope of those problems, I do have notes from that meeting with neighbors that I can share with you. But I'll open it up if anyone has any questions for Jonathan.
Yeah, I guess I could talk a little bit here. Thanks for coming in and to talk, John. I'm kind of curious, what brought you in here? Was there on the, like Gabriella said, I know someone talked here a couple of weeks ago. I know there's been the public works projects to add the improvements to Lyman Lane and Florin Drive, where I actually live on Florin Drive, right north of or south of McKee Farms Park. And so I know all about this. And so I guess I'm kind of curious, what was there one reason, couple reasons? Maybe it was this meeting that you had with your neighbors that kind of brought you here, or what was the reason?
Yeah, I guess it started, well, I guess it was brought to sort of greater action with a next door post asking, who cares about this, who has issues, who agrees, who wants to do something about this. And tons of us chimed in. So then kind of didn't hear anything for a while. And then that meeting got planned, and I attended the meeting and found out about this one there. But being a new homeowner in the neighborhood, of course, nobody wants to buy a house and get all settled in and then realize, holy cow, there's water around us a lot. And it's not just me. And this problem is big. I can't do anything about it. And who wants to constantly live on the verge of having part of their house flooded at any given moment? So I had heard some of the horror stories from some of our neighbors who had been here for a while, and everybody has had a flooded basement. And I thought, well, at least we haven't had that. And then this spring, our sump pump died, and we got to join that club of flooded basements. Now, luckily, ours is not finished. It's all concrete slab and concrete, foundation walls. And I was surprised to learn that the sump itself, was very well sealed. Water came in from about everywhere else, every crack, every nook and cranny. Our garage has stairs down to the basement in the back of it, and that's all inside. But under that staircase at the bottom, water comes in. Even when it rains, water will be coming in there. I have no idea from where. The steps are wooden, but I assume it's all cement. It's somewhere back behind there. And that's where a lot of this water was coming in. So, I don't know, a little more than half of our basement had quite a bit of water in it. Luckily, we were working from home, and I happened to go down there and see something. So I estimate that the pump had stopped running for about 3 hours. And just for context, my sump pump, since we moved in, not counting kind of that summer dry spell, runs 2 to 3 times per minute. And just one instance last year, I remember I was out doing something in the yard and I had a little 3-gallon bucket. And I thought, I'm going to go see how much of this bucket, one discharge cycle produces. And it about filled that bucket. And so I, run some quick math and you realize just how much water is being pumped out of just my house. Now, the street's always wet on both sides, so I know people uphill from me are pumping water out like crazy. So I guess I was encouraged that other people were having this problem. We're kind of coming together as a neighborhood, and I use that term loosely. It's a pretty decent sized area to do something about this problem. So that's what brought me here. Is fresh on my mind, being a new homeowner, thinking I got a lot of water in my backyard, and our last house we put a lot of money into landscaping because there were drainage issues, and luckily that was solved. But I realized, I don't want to buy another house that's going to have water issues, and here we are. So I was a little disappointed by that, and that just was my motivation for being here. So that's what brought me here in the roundabout way.
John, can you remind us what street you live on?
Sure, I am at 2816 Rose Ellen.
Okay.
I'm the second house to the north of Rose Ellen, right smack dab in the middle of the park lot there.
It's to the north of?
To the south.
Oh, to the south. I thought you said to the north. And did you say sure. All of your neighbors are having, all of your neighbors, I'll say uphill, south of you are also having the same problem?
Yes, I know. So 2817, straight across the street from me, their basement, I believe, has flooded twice. Their backyard, if you look at the split, the 5673 and 5663, that lot line kind of straight across the 2817 lot.
Okay.
Basically, everything to the west of that was just perpetually swampy this spring and summer. And I know the house next to it, they just doubled the width of their sump, added a couple more pumps, rerouted to the street, and it dried up some of that water, but not all of it.
So
and
this is not stormwater that's coming up over the curb. This is groundwater.
Correct. Obviously, when it rains, we get a lot of water, but it eventually drains. It's not standing water for weeks on end. But I know I think it's between 5663 and 5667. It might be the other side of it. They put in, I believe that would be a French drain, like a little rock channel.
Yeah.
That their sump discharge comes out the back of their house or the side and then goes to that little channel and drains to the street. That's got a lot of water. There's a ton of ice that forms right around that curve. In the winter, I've seen them out there chopping and chopping and chopping. That is it's very settled in that side. So there's no drain there. It can't get across the street. It can't flow east or west. So hence the ice. But all that water will come down the hill. That's how it gets there. Whether it's underground or above ground, it gets to the bottom of the hill. I'm at the bottom of the hill too, at 2816, and that 5641 lot is pretty much just trees. Well, it's half trees. My understanding was that was trees left over from when they built the neighborhood, and they were keeping them there, and then they would put them around at different houses, and that's just what was left. So it's a pretty good grove of mature trees. The other half is just grass. That is pretty much below street level at this point. It probably wasn't when it was built. My lot has settled as well. And in good rains, I can go back behind there and see the river of water coming down. And it's probably 2 feet wide. And then mine is a lake. And then it just slowly trickles into smaller and smaller lakes as it gets closer to the street. So the flow definitely stops way too soon. And I don't think there's any above ground solution to get it basically back uphill to the street. So even just grinding away the curb isn't going to create that. With all the trees there, trenching under them, I guess, is the only thing I can think of. I'm not sure. Or putting a drain in somewhere in there and getting it out that way. But so both sides of Rosellen, I know have that same issue. And both sides of Rosellen are wet. The gutters are wet in the streets all the time. So we're lucky enough to have a storm drain right in front of our house and to uphill from our driveway. So we don't particularly have a big ice problem. But I do know my sump pump runs all winter because every time it snows on that drain pipe, and I put a 4-inch drain pipe out above ground during the winter, every time it snows on it, it gets melted off right away. And that drain is
How long did you say that you've lived there?
Since May of last year.
And this problem has been going, based on your neighbors who came to our meeting, this problem has been going on for a number of years. So this was not disclosed to you when you bought your house?
No, we asked if there had been water in the basement because we could see, I always forget what that's called, the little white fluffy stuff on the concrete. We could see that, and basically everywhere that was where water came up when our sump pump died. Now our sump pump was, gosh, it was probably close to original in the house. It was quite old. So maybe they never had it with a sump issue, but there was moisture there, you could tell. I don't know if it ever flooded. Everybody else around us has finished basements, so they're definitely more willing to share when their basement flooded. But I always wondered that. I always questioned that there's no way that water just started magically coming in after we bought the house.
I'm just curious. That doesn't help with the solution. I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Was it
the people across from us are original owners, and they're like I said, their basements flooded twice in that 20 some years.
Hey, Jonathan, was there a pre-purchase inspection done?
Yeah.
They would identify that.
Yeah.
But they didn't identify flooding in the basement or flooding issues?
No.
I'm surprised to hear that they're going to make you put an 8-inch pipe. That's a pretty big pipe. I know. I mean, that's probably the size of. I'm shocked. Claudia, do you?
Yeah. So the requirement is actually a 6-inch pipe when it's in the right of way, and that's just because we want to minimize the number of holes that we put into our structures. So if someone else needed to get into that structure, we would want to make sure that there's enough capacity for other people to tie into the same hole on the backside of that structure. So the requirement would be for anywhere within the right of way to have that 6-inch pipe. And then once it's in the lot, it can be any size that their plumber wants it to be.
And that right of way is 33 feet from the middle of the street. Is that correct? On either side?
So let's see. And this is, the lot lines are not always exactly correct in here, but I'm getting 24 and a half feet. And you would tie into the backside of the inlet. You wouldn't have to go
right
into the middle of the street.
Yeah, he definitely told me 8-inch because I probably clarified that about 3 times on that phone call because I was shocked. But and that was, I thought, the city engineer. Unfortunately, it was all I don't have a record to go back to. But yeah, that's the storm drain.
Yeah, so I'm definitely interested in keeping that. Thanks for bringing this up again, Jonathan. I think this conversation is really important for us to continue exploring with the RCC. And we've been having a lot of these stormwater conversations, which obviously extend beyond this area. But this area obviously means a lot to me personally, just because it's in my district and quite close to my home as well. So I think I'd like to continue that conversation with staff and see if there's something we can put into the capital improvement plan to see if we can support some homeowners in some way, or perhaps if there's some sort of information we can provide to homeowners in terms of what their options are to tie into city stormwater system and what the process looks like for that, so that there's some clarity, like so that those 8-inch pipe situations don't happen. So yeah, I think we'll have some work to do on this front, but I really thank you so much for coming and chatting about it and letting us hear from you.
Yeah, and I would just add that I know, so the people, in reference to your blue line, I guess, my house is right there in front of that. The people to the north of me on our side, the people straight across from them, and the people to the left with the brown house, the brown roof to the 2 houses from that one that you're on, 2 houses south from that one. They all have the terminals, on their discharges that just push the water over the curb. So those curbs are perpetually wet, covered in moss, in the warm months. They will change over to above ground pipes in the winter, but that's the alternative, that you just have that water streaming over the curb and down the street year round. And so I think there would be good incentive, for the city to help us out, at least getting these things attached directly to the storm sewer system and get that water out of the streets. And it's not that we aren't willing, to help pay for it, obviously, but collectively, I feel like it'd be much better than each of us going and finding somebody willing to do it and pay those costs individually.
Right, yeah, and that's kind of what was planned to go on my street in Florian and Lyman, where it was all going to be special assessed. And I know that's still in the works. I know Claudia did a good job of sending out like a survey to learn a little bit more about the information. I think that's definitely the next step, is just learning more and having more people come in and raising these issues. So yeah, like you really said, I think this isn't the first time someone has come in for this issue. So I think it's definitely something important that we can keep talking about.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for giving me the floor here.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you.
Claudia, I think that what Gabriella suggested is a great idea. I know that your plate is pretty full, but if you can, or your intern maybe can put together some kind of a document of options that these folks have as just to help resolve this issue, I think that would be great.
Right, and I know that there was a neighborhood meeting recently, which Bill actually attended, and not myself because I'm swamped. And I believe the outcome of that was that we are going to plan to look into this this winter, but we don't have staff capacity to look at it right now just because we have so many other projects going on. But it is on our radar. I understand that it's important and we need to start looking into it as soon as possible.
I didn't mean actually just for these neighbors, but we talked about there was an issue up in my neighborhood where people actually, I don't think that came to RCC, but there was an issue that came up in my neighborhood about water issues and drainage issues. And so I think that this is going to come up more and more often. If we just have something that we can offer homeowners, these are things that you could try doing.
Right, and I know that I was trying to give at least some of that information in the stormwater utility maintenance plan, which once I have time to actually address some comments, we'll finally go through the resolution will go through. But that does have information on public versus private responsibility, and it explains the capital improvement process and how that works and the timeline, because that really is the way to solve a lot of these problems, is to for us to first of all know about them. That's how we did the Lyman and Florian Drive project. Enough people complain, it gets on our radar, and then we put it through the CIP process and the funding gets approved, and then you can do the project. That's really how this works. So right away, when people are having a problem, we don't necessarily have funding to address it immediately. There's a little bit of a process that it needs to go through to get the funding approved, and then the project has to be prioritized against other projects, of course. And then once we have that funding available, then we can do the project.
Actually, if I could just interrupt, if I remember from the stormwater document that you have in the mill, groundwater is not, the city doesn't have responsibility for groundwater, it's stormwater that they do. So I was thinking more like, there are landscaping options that people could try, French drains or berms, and then as John was talking about connecting to the city, then, laying out that that's also an option, and this is what you would have to do, this is what would be involved, but, more like, here's some troubleshooting things that you could try.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So just basically like a 1 or 2 page handout that kind of goes over some common issues and a few general things you could do. Yeah, I think that's definitely something we could put together.
Okay.
And I think we could also include those pages from the stormwater utility guide, because you did such a great job of explaining that. I loved that guide. I thought it was fantastic, but pull those pages that are maybe most relevant to people with these stormwater issues and then add in some and I have notes, Claudia, that I can share with you. And I feel like I'm starting to get a sense of the consistent problems that come up. And so I wonder if I could even maybe generate like a list of frequently asked questions and
sure. Yeah, that would be great.
But that can help guide like what people are most interested in, and we can work through this at some point. I know you're busy, but maybe we can, with the help from the committee, maybe we can get this, make it as easy for you as possible.
Sure, that would be helpful if you could send that my way.
And keep in mind, winter's almost here, so we can tackle
it
pretty soon.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that concerns me is just that it's, a groundwater issue there. And so, there are certain things that, when you have a high groundwater issue, in addition to a stormwater issue, it makes it harder to, do the options, the rain gardens and French drains, because then you're just contributing more to that issue. It's like you got to get the water displaced out of that area some way, somehow. And so, I think, as we're putting something together, that might be a cut sheet as a toolbox for people, homeowners to potentially use. We should kind of consider kind of options when high water is an issue and when it's not.
Yeah, and when high groundwater is an issue, lowering the groundwater table is really just not a feasible option, unfortunately. So really what folks should be doing is waterproofing their basements and getting a backup sump pump. That's really, there's not much you can do with a high groundwater table that's persistently high.
Claudia, do we know groundwater elevations in this area? Or do we have
We don't. That's not something that the city monitors. I do know USGS does some groundwater monitoring, but their wells are kind of sparsely situated. Last I checked earlier this year, I know as of last year, when you looked at their report, it was, they have little different colored dots depending on how high the groundwater table is compared to normal, and all of them were black, which means it was above the 90th percentile of their data ever seen. So we definitely have had really high groundwater the last few years at least.
Do you think it might be something in the future we might want to consider for new developments, is to have some type of record of groundwater elevations in that area?
It's not a bad idea. I mean, I think if that information was available, then that would be something that would be useful to look into. But if we're talking about record high groundwater information, I mean, I don't know that it could have been prevented in this area because groundwater's never been this high, at least in the amount of time that we've been recording data. But now that we have had groundwater high for a really long time, that would give us, some indication of what that might look like in the future. The only problem I see with that is a lot of times that data isn't available. If you're developing a farm field, a lot of times there's no reason someone has been collecting that data in the farm field,
Nate, we're 40 minutes late.
Good to know. Yeah, no, I think.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, go ahead, Nate.
I was going to move on. Last thought, Chris.
Yeah, I did some, a long time ago. I think Waterford Glen. I did the pits for the development. So I went out and dug down in Fitchburg. What I saw in that area was there's you kind of got into this clay layer like 3 or 4 feet down, and then that went down for a while, and then you got into a sand and gravel after that. So some of it could be perched above, obviously with the basement situation. I don't know what the geology situation is there. How much of this is just kind of water that's kind of sitting on top of a clay layer versus something that, maybe we could puncture through that and be recharging the groundwater system. More so, I doubt that's the case, but, I just wonder about those types of potential solutions and, just thinking about the geology and seeing where the true water table is to try to figure out a longer term solution here.
Yeah, no, a lot of good thoughts. I think this is definitely a hot topic, obviously with the number of guests and, the capital improvement projects going on. So I think, we'll keep hearing this and keep on coming up with solutions. I think the frequently asked questions, I might volunteer to do a star article to, help people out of what to think about these issues. So, a lot going on. I think this is good, but we should move on. And we'll just keep this on the agenda for the next couple of meetings, just to keep up to date. So, thanks for your input. But let's move on to approval of the minutes. 3A, the draft minutes from last meeting, the September 24th meeting, were enclosed in the packet. And do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I move to approve.
I second.
Very good. Thanks for that. Do we have any discussion or comments?
Mhm.
Any edits?
Nope.
All right. With that, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes as is in the packet, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries to approve the minutes from last meeting. Very good. Let's get into some new business. Agenda item 4A. We got resolution R-172-20. Authorization of the acceptance of proposal for stormwater management study.
And I can give a little bit of background on this project.
I move to approve resolution R-172-20.
I second.
Thank you.
And I guess if anyone would like, I can give background information. Okay.
Actually, I have questions, so I wouldn't mind. You want me to ask my questions and you can just cover that?
Sure, that would be great.
I'd like to know how this project, because we have several stormwater projects, on tap supposedly somewhere in the next 5 years, how this one was chosen, and is this in the urban service area?
This is outside of the urban service area. This one specifically was chosen because the folks in this area have been having a lot of flooding issues, first floor flooding. So water has been getting onto the first floor of structures in this area, which is this building down here has gotten water on the first floor. And I believe either 1 or 2 of the condos in this area has gotten first floor flooding as well. So other than Lake Barney in the south of Fitchburg, this is one of the areas that has had a lot of problems. It's also a very long-term, I guess, an area that's had long-term problems. So they've been having groundwater and water issues for over 10 years is my understanding. So it's definitely not something that's just popped up in the last few years as a result of high groundwater or record high groundwater. They've been dealing with this for a very long time. So that's why, at least in my mind, this was one of the more critical stormwater issues that the city is facing.
So would you say of the scale that this one is, this would be number 1 to be addressed as far as critical?
In my opinion, yes. So So the scale that I proposed as part of the stormwater utility management plan had number one, I guess to get the highest rank, had to have flooding of primary structures, and this does have that.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Claudia, what's the direction of water flow in that area, surface water?
So water flows on Curry Court, it generally flows in this direction. And then it goes under, there are some culverts here, and then it crosses this way. There's a culvert under the railroad track over here.
Okay.
And then on the east side of the railroad tracks, there's a kettle where water pools until it gets over a certain elevation, and then it continues downstream. I believe this goes to Swan Creek eventually. But I guess the difficulty with this situation is that there's not a lot of fall along Curry Court. So I believe the slope of the ditch here is less than 0.5%. And then the culvert at the railroad track is kind of a set elevation. So you can't really lower that, and there's a kettle on the other side anyway. So there's not an easy solution here. I think one of the reasons why this issue has been, I guess, in existence for so long is because there isn't an easy solution. If there was an easy solution, the city would have taken care of it much longer before now, because it's been on everyone's radar for a really long time. So the purpose of this study would be to do a feasibility analysis on what can be done, and then put together cost estimates for the different options. So one option is certainly pumping. I imagine that will be very costly, but there might be some other things that we could do to improve the situation, but not necessarily fix it 100%. So once we have all that information, we'd be able to make a decision on the best path forward here.
How many houses are affected?
So all of the houses on Curry Court are affected.
So 6, is that right? There are 6 there?
One, two. These are owned by the same person, I believe.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, so I treat this as one property. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then all of these property, actually there's a water comes here and then it crosses the street here.
Okay.
And these folks here are having issues. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, those folks are having issues. This person over here is having issues as well. I know there were a couple people on Sayin that also were having some problems with basically water is stopping up in the park and causing some trees to die, and that's causing trees to potentially fall on private property. So those are, I guess, a few issues that folks have been running into, or I guess some of the people who have been affected.
Is that a wetland area that's inside that park?
It hasn't necessarily been delineated. We haven't had an official delineation done, but just from walking back there, I would say yes, there is definitely wetland there. The exact extent of it would need to be delineated.
Mm-hmm. So when you say first floor, do you mean the actual first level of their house or apartment or condo it's water in it? Like it's
right. Yeah, that's what that means.
So that means the whole area would be flooded around there, right? Like standing water everywhere?
Right, exactly, for water to get into those buildings. Yeah.
Small lake.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak, Claudia, this is Gabriella. Can you speak a little bit about the funding for the project? It looks like the Seminole Village Pond came in under budget, so you're able to move this up a year earlier. Is that correct?
Right. So the Seminole Village Pond project came in under budget for two reasons. One was when we put together the cost estimate for that, we were assuming that a certain amount of material would need to be dredged. And that's the information that we used to put together the cost estimate that went into the CIP. But then after that funding was approved, we went and actually took tests in the area of the soft sediment to get a better idea of the actual amount that would need to be removed. And it was much less than we originally thought. I think we said, these numbers aren't necessarily correct, but I think we said something like we thought 3 feet would need to be removed and it was 1.5 feet, something on that scale. So when you're talking about a couple foot difference over a large area of material that needs to be removed, that actually comes up to a pretty big difference. And then the other reason is because we were able to get grant funding for that project from Dane County, their water quality grant.
Great. And so that project is still under, so there's no concerns about funding anymore, but that's still in the works, right? The Seminole Village Pond.
Right. It's my understanding, and that's Bill's project, but my understanding is that that is very close to completion. I know that they have done the grading and the dredging, and I believe the slopes have all been matted and seeded and stabilized. So I'm not sure. I know that they were thinking about potentially putting trees, but I'm not sure if that was going to be able to happen. That might be the only thing that's outstanding there.
And the vegetation is always the last step, right? That's always the...
Right, yeah, that is the last step.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nate, the 10 minutes allowed for this item has passed.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any questions or comments. I think this is a worthy project, and it seemed like you went through a good proposal review, and yeah, I think it looks okay.
We need to vote.
Okay. Let's see, all in favor of approving resolution R-172-20, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion carries to approve resolution R-172-20, at least from the RCC. Is this getting moved on to a couple others, I think, right?
It's also going to go to Public Works and Finance, and I believe Parks Commission already saw it.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Thanks for sharing the project. Get back to the agenda here. Let's keep moving to item 4B, the proposed brush and yard waste pickup weeks. I think there is a calendar included in the packet if we want to reference that. Claudia, you want to share something about that?
Yes, so last year, I believe we started looking at the calendar in November. And by that time, we weren't able to move around our brush and yard waste pickup dates to be the exact dates that we wanted, just because the way that it works with Pelletieri is if they're not in Fitchburg, they're in other communities doing brush and yard waste pickups. So they can't necessarily, move ours to a different week if they already have someone else scheduled. So I wanted to bring this up sooner rather than later this year. So if we do have preferences, that we can request that from Pelletieri and hopefully get what we want if we put those requests in sooner rather than later. So one thing that I just quickly marked up on my version of the brush and yard waste calendar, which was not included in the packet, I did go ahead and outline in red the recycling weeks, because I know we do sometimes try to make sure that our recycling weeks don't correspond with the brush and yard waste pickup weeks, just so that there's less at the curb. But sometimes it's not always possible to avoid those conflicts.
Claudia, did Pelletieri draft this?
They did, yeah. So once we have it finalized with Pelletieri, I'll put this into our format, just so there's no confusion on that. It will, at the end of the day, it will look like our format. And yeah, this is just because Pelletieri put it together.
The reason I'm asking is this year, if I remember correctly, you arranged to space the brush collections evenly throughout the year. Is that correct? So isn't that what you ended up doing?
I remember having this discussion. I honestly don't remember. Here, let me just pull up the collection calendar. So, brush collection. Oh, I think we did. I think that is what we did. That's a good point.
I think that's what you did, and I'm just concerned. I mean, I know that people get used to. We used to do it at certain times. Would be every other week. We'd have brush collection, and I still see people kind of putting that out rather than looking at the schedule. But we need to have, I think, from one year to the next to be somewhat consistent. So we're not going to do every 3 weeks, which I thought was fine. But if we're not going to do that, then whatever we do, maybe we can standardize that as much as possible going forward.
Sure. It looks like we did every other week in April and May, and then in June we went to every 3 weeks. And then in October and November we went back to every other week.
Okay, so
maybe
that's kind of what they've done here. I would suggest when we get to October and November that they do yard waste the second week in October. People have already put yard waste out by the curb now. And the same thing with November, the second week in November, which would be November 8th. If we wait until the 22nd, we might have snow. We may not even get a brush pickup in that week. So that's kind of late to be putting out yard waste, I think.
Okay.
I think, one of the considerations was one year the leaves came down late, but
I remember hearing horror stories that folks were not happy that they weren't getting an additional pickup when that happened. So maybe that's why we moved it the way it looks now.
What's everybody else thinking about that?
Can you scroll down to show October? I can't always see September up to September.
Oh, okay. Can you see it now?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm looking at the packet.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me just share. Okay. Can you see it now? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So this year in 2020, we had the 4th week of October and the 4th week of November for the yard waste collection. And I think, Diane, it was in response to what you had said because of that year when it fell late, when the leaves fell late.
No, actually, we tried to move it and Pelletieri couldn't do that. I mean, we had this conversation last year and we were going to move it up and Pelletieri said that whatever their schedule was, they couldn't do that.
Okay. I do remember that we couldn't move something, but I couldn't remember which one it was. Okay, so that makes sense.
So the schedule that we're looking at now is this year's schedule, correct?
Yes.
It pretty much mirrors what Pelletieri has drafted for next year.
Well, how are folks feeling? Do folks want us to request the yard waste the 2nd week of October and the 2nd week of November instead of the 4th?
It's kind of a gamble. I mean, there is a good point where, yeah, there's a ton of leaves now, and yeah, we have to wait, 2 more weeks for the first pickup, but it's nice to have that buffer, that last week in November to capture all the late leaves too. So I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I think you can make arguments for both.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, we rake a lot of leaves. I'm just trying to think I just don't think we're out there before Thanksgiving though. I think we're usually done. But
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion either. I agree though with Diane that once we figure out what we want to do to keep it consistent moving forward, I think is helpful.
The other thing we could ask is maybe we could see if we can move the brush only pickup to the first week of October, and then the brush and yard waste to the third week of October, and then shift all of these up a week. So it would be the week of the 15th and the week of the 18th.
That's a good idea.
For the brush and yard waste.
And that gets it out of a holiday week also.
I like
Yeah,
that
so,
idea.
all right, I'll ask Pelletieri if that's possible. Hopefully, since we're requesting that earlier this year, that can be accommodated. But if that's not possible, should I keep it as is or switch it around?
You
I
know,
think,
it's just such a crapshoot because, like I said, people have already put their yard waste out. I haven't seen any leaves out by the curb, but I've seen yard waste. Some people have already cut back their perennials. This also gets it out of recycling week, which you'd think that would be easier for Pelletieri. So maybe if we ask soon enough, that can be accomplished.
mhm. Okay, I will ask that tomorrow. And hopefully that can be done. So I'll ask about moving these 4 up 1 week. And then, did anyone have any other comments?
Hold on a second.
Oh,
Claudia,
sorry
you
about
do
that.
There is a, oh, that's recycling week. Never mind. I was getting the red boxes confused. Okay.
Oh, sure.
Good.
Okay, well, thank you for your input, everyone.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Yeah, let us know what they say, but I think, Pelletieri did a good job honoring at least our last year's schedule into this year, so. Little side comment. Let's move on to the next item for C, discussing permanently moving RCC meetings to the second Monday, which we are currently in the second Monday right now. And it seemed like everyone was pretty content with that, but it seems like we kind of want to have a firm yay or nay at this point as we start to schedule the next set of meetings. So I guess, does anyone have any problems with it being switched to the second Monday? I know it made sense just from a bunch of, bringing items to us to approve and to look at, and with budget season, it seems like that works out with that. So any negatives that anyone can see?
I can see a positive, at least in January, it gets us away from the Martin Luther King holiday juggling. But the negative for staff is it's very close to, after the holiday, after the New Year's holiday and Christmas holiday, we'll be coming back and having a meeting. But there are some positives, Nate, as far as getting our calendar ready for next year and getting things ready for the council. We're not so late into January to get that started.
So it will always be a day before the common council meeting?
I think it was before, because it was the third, or was it? It was the third Monday. Was that just before the common council meeting also?
Common council should be second and fourth Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
And I think maybe that's why Bill was saying it would be better in terms of resolutions, for the timeliness of resolutions, because we can talk about the resolutions on Monday and give our opinion to council to discuss the very next day.
Yeah.
It'll be after plan commission too, because plan commission's typically the offset Tuesday, so plan was last Tuesday in preparation for council on Tuesday, so we'll be able to hear what they have to say and weigh in on it. And if anything else comes up, like we could potentially even review the plan commission meeting in advance of the RCC if there's something significant on the horizon.
Okay with me.
Yeah, okay with me.
It's fine with me.
All right,
Yep.
great.
How's that for an informal vote? Kim, are you okay with that?
Oh, yeah, I was trying to get off of my unmute. So yes, it works for me.
All right, perfect. Well, I will go ahead and get that updated on the RCC's webpage, and then we'll consider that our official new date rather than just temporary during COVID.
Yay.
That starts next year.
Starts now.
It's already started because we've been on that schedule for the temporary basis.
All right. Well, we're keeping on going, but we're still 25 minutes behind. So let's move on to 4D Green Tier Legacy Communities Scorecard Update, which there were several pages in the packet for us to reference. And looks like Phil has something to share.
Yes. So this is something that I believe I referenced a few meetings ago, that the Green Tier Legacy Communities have a program improvement work group that is looking at the score sheet we've used in the past for annual score reporting for the Green Tier Legacy Communities. And I can actually pull up that score sheet really quickly as well. There were some concerns raised with the old score sheet. I guess right now is the current score sheet that primarily have to do with it just feeling, the categories feeling a little arbitrary to some communities. There wasn't necessarily a lot of logic for why different categories were given the scores that they were, why certain actions were chosen to be scored. It didn't necessarily feel like it was particularly quantitatively cohesive, I guess, or internally consistent. So the work group has been working on putting together a score sheet that maybe is a little bit easier to compare across communities, not necessarily for competitive reasons, but if you're looking at comparable communities and you want to know what are some things that some of our peers are doing that we could look into as well. We wanted something that might be a little bit more robust and a little bit more descriptive, and also something that maybe could have a little bit more. It might be something that communities could better use as supporting material for grant applications. So this was the old score sheet that we had, divided into a number of different sections and subsections. And as you can see, we've been tracking our progress in the score sheet for a number of years. But what the program improvement work group has come up with to this point now is the score sheet that was presented in your packet. The structure is a little bit more designed after a number of current other environmental frameworks. Personally, I've gone through the leadership in energy and environmental design accreditation process, and the scoring has a very similar format to that. So it's something that will look familiar to people that have gone through certification in other environmental programs. This is divided into seven different issues. We have emissions reduction, transportation systems, land use, water quality and conservation, solid waste, health and safety, and then community inequity. And within each one of these sections, we have some primary metrics that we're interested in. And then beneath each of these metrics, we have a series of actions that could be completed that could support various metrics within that category. So this has been presented. We've spent several months working on this with a lot of help from a couple of folks with some nonprofits in the area, especially Slipstream, who you may know that name because Slipstream was part of the Office of Energy Innovation grant. They worked as the program manager for that OEI grant reporting. And this score sheet was just presented to some sustainability staff and other leaders with various communities around the state just to get some feedback, get people's initial thoughts. And the primary concern that has been raised is that a number of these metrics are things that unless you have dedicated sustainability staff, and there's not really, I don't think, any community smaller than Fitchburg that has or I guess Middleton and Fitchburg, that has a full-time sustainability staffer. So if you don't have dedicated sustainability staff, it can be difficult maybe to compile some of this information. So we're kind of working on how to best address that. But I just kind of wanted to present this to the RCC and see if anybody had a chance to look over this over the weekend, if you had any feedback, any thoughts on this.
I have a couple of things. I didn't look at this in a lot of detail, but I just want to mention a couple of things. It talks about banning idling. You might want to put voluntary idling, because some voluntary idling has a different definition than just plain idling. If you're sitting at a stoplight, that's idling, but people turn their engines off sitting at a stoplight.
Sure. Yeah, that would be something to look. I think I'd be curious to see just sort of how that term is typically used. I don't think we'd ask anybody to turn their car off at a stoplight.
Yeah, we did a couple of programs on voluntary idling and defined it, and I'd be happy to share that definition
Sure.
later. But I think you want to put voluntary idling. There was also an area in here that talks about measure the gasoline used in the community. How are you going to measure gasoline in, for example, the community uses in Fitchburg?
Let's see, we have municipal. Do you mean here with the community
Yes.
DUI?
Yep.
Okay. Gallons of gasoline. That would be a tricky one.
Yeah.
KWH and therms, we probably could get that information from utilities as long as they're providing it to us in the aggregate, not with any identifying information. But yeah, gallons of gas. I think what a community would typically do is essentially just perform a calculation to get a best estimate. So we have X number of residents. Here's the number of people we have that are employed, and what do we assume an average commute is and an average fuel efficiency for vehicles. So it's a very rough estimate, but that would be the best we could do for something like that.
I think we used, when we were doing the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, I think we used vehicle miles traveled, and for that, you have to assume what kind of vehicle they're using, but we use traffic counts. It's a pretty, you might want to reconsider including that, because it's going to be a guesstimate and not even a good guesstimate.
Right.
My last comment, and then I'll let everybody else talk. There's something in there about restricting mowing to visibility areas, and it didn't include parks. And I'm assuming that we still want parks to be mowed.
Only mow or clear public properties and rights of way. Yeah, so that might just need a little bit clearer definition of what they mean by public properties. But yeah, that's definitely something to mention. I hadn't caught that. Thanks.
Oh, I did have one other one. They're talking about having bike racks for multifamily and commercial properties. I think it said commercial properties. One of my pet peeves is that we have a lot of stores that you can't get to by walking on a sidewalk. You have to walk into the street to get there. Like the Walgreens on PD, if you're coming to Walgreens from north of PD, you have to walk on the driveway into the strip mall parking. And another one is Cahill, Maine. If you approach Cahill, Maine from the back, which is as I do, if you're coming around by the Pick and Save store, you're walking again, not on sidewalks, but on where traffic is going. So somewhere, new developments and new commercial buildings, there should be pedestrian sidewalk accessible.
You're referring to this action here?
No.
No.
Well, I didn't,
Incorporate-
I wasn't mentioning that one. There was one that said that
Oh.
we have to have bike racks. And I thought, well, okay, bike racks are fine, but let's make sure that they have sidewalks too.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing that I'm seeing regarding bike racks is about making sure that any public transit has racks on vehicles for carrying bikes.
It was early.
But I'm doing just a global search, so that if I'm using the wrong term, then I'm not going to find it.
Okay.
But yeah, that's another thing that I'll look into as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Were there a lot of differences with this compared to what you had before?
There was a lot more. The metrics that are used in here are much more broad. So a lot of the scoring categories would be things like, are you a bird-friendly community? And that's something that was removed. I think we've moved down to one of the possible actions to support a metric, but the metric is going to be more, let me see if I can find water quality and conservation. So we have, this is just water conservation. So for land use, we have things like wildlife species count, preserved land space, so much broader metrics that the community would set as a goal, not necessarily those smaller, narrower actions. So those would have been moved down here. We're still talking about the possibility of having a few blank rows beneath each set of metrics so that you can propose your own actions that might support some of the goals above. I don't know an exact number, but I think somewhere around 60 to 70% of the old score sheet is reflected somehow in this new one. But a lot of the rows were moved down to supporting actions rather than the primary scoring metrics.
Great.
As I looked through all this information, I thought it was really informative, and it'd be nice to have, all this information completed, and so it, helps us support us, Fitchburg being a green community. But this is a lot of effort here, as you said.
Yeah.
But no, you'd have to have, like you said, staff to do complete it. But it's very useful for us.
It was even one of the issues that I ran into last year was that because there's so much information to compile, you can't possibly have one person who's able to address it all. So I did a lot of reaching out to other staff members in the city. I looked back at what Erica and Ellen had done in previous years. And yeah, there's always going to be probably a little bit of a fudge factor where you're not sure exactly how something should be defined, or, we tried to make it as clear as possible, but it definitely is, it is a pretty big lift, and especially moving to a new.
Yeah, I don't know if the city has any biologists on staff or people who can do this type of work, or.
Well, and some of the things are going to be non-applicable. This is something that we're not doing a wildlife species count this year. So for 2020, this isn't something that we're including. But if we have data on the number of brownfield sites and green infrastructure projects, these are things we can include. So it's, I think the hope and the expectation is that if a city has the staff dedicated to doing these kinds of collecting this type of data and doing these kinds of projects, then they'll be able to fill in the score sheet. If it's something that the city really doesn't have anybody who knows about it, it probably means you don't have the data, you're not tracking it, so it's not something you would score anyway.
Yeah.
But it was. I spent quite a bit of time on this in my first few months last year, and I'm hoping it's a little bit quicker this year because I'm more familiar with everything. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's a good source for ideas for different things. We kind of have, brainstorming sessions every once in a while, and this could be a good source. I also think that, Nate, we could use it, at the beginning of the year when we're kind of more so planning out our goals, or at the end of the year for the following year, planning out goals for the RCC, and we could look at some of these ideas and these different lists and say, let's really try to, work on one of these initiatives. We want to be Tree City USA, or get a certification as Tree City USA. What do we need to do to get that certification? How can RCC support that? But kind of help the staff chip these off and tie those into some of our internal RCC goals that we have each year.
It definitely is one of my hopes, is to use this as that sort of a ticker to see what should we be working on, that we're not actually completing this action. Is that something we need to make a priority for the future?
Mm-hmm.
And then along with sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just had another question about some of the goals. So for instance, for some of the goals that are listed, I'll just use the transportation ones for example. Is that something where you would sit down with other committees that would be involved in that and talk to them about, these are some, goals we've identified. How can we work together to achieve some of these goals? Is that kind of what you're thinking about, or how does it, how do these goals get identified and worked towards as it relates to the rest of the staff and support?
So because we do have limited staff given our city size, some of it is just kind of tracking where we're at. If there are things that definitely the metric or the actions align with things that we've currently identified as our goals, then that's something where we want to use this as a way to kind of support and push that effort forward. Ideally, some of the scoring in here would also reveal areas where we realize we're not doing as well as we think we should, and that might help to identify some areas for attention and growth that maybe we hadn't already had on the radar. I think it'll be a little bit of a mix of those, but there will also be some where we say, all right, this one we've got a 0, and it's not a 3 or 4 year priority item, and we'll address that in the future again. But it's kind of going to need to be a mix of all those. We definitely aren't at a place where we can push on all of these all at the same time.
So how many members of the legacy communities are Fitchburg size or smaller?
That's a great question, and I would only be spitballing if I if I gave a number. I'm not sure.
You think 50%, or is that too high?
I think over. Let's go with 50%.
Well,
I think somewhere around there.
Let's say it is 50%, and
yeah,
very few have are fortunate enough to have a person like you on staff. Maybe, I really appreciate this whole list and the approach that you're taking, and I think it's a huge improvement over the previous scorecard, but maybe it's just too overwhelming to be functional or useful for smaller communities.
It's possible, and that's part of the discussion we had at our last meeting, is do we want to maybe create kind of a more scaled down version of this, that if you don't have the staff dedicated to it, you don't feel like you're just going through and marking everything non-applicable, because that has a certain kind of demotivational effect, and you certainly don't want to use a score sheet like this. This should be something that is motivating, that is encouraging, that is rewarding. It shouldn't make you feel like you're failing.
Yeah.
And so if there are a number of communities that feel like this is not really applicable to them, that's something that we need to address before we finalize it and release it to all the GTLC group member communities.
Can you, I'm not sure what the ER codes are for, but is it possible to prioritize or hit to pull out the most important in each of them, or the biggest bang for your buck?
Possible. So these all just refer to, they reflect the category here. So these are emissions reduction. Next is sustainability, transportation systems. So all of the actions are TS.
Okay.
So these are just the actions that support those specific metrics. And so, this one here, require bike parking. that's related to walk score and bike score and community sustainable transportation. So it's just kind of a mapping key, linking the actions to specific metrics.
Okay.
And I think it would probably, I think trying to rank each of the actions is going to be a bit of a wild goose chase. I think depending on the community and what their needs are and what their characteristics are, different actions are going to have different value for each of us.
Okay.
But yeah, it's still working on finalizing this. Certainly, once it's done, I will probably try to share the finalized version again with the RCC. Certainly, this year when I completed the scorecard and the narrative and submitted it to the DNR, right around the time I would have been sharing all of that with the RCC, we weren't meeting because we were still kind of trying to recalibrate due to the remote work and everything. So certainly once I get into completing this score sheet for 2020, I'll be sharing those results with the RCC as well.
Thanks for your work on this.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, are you LEED certified now?
I am LEED accredited, yeah.
Oh, that's what I meant. Oh, good. Congratulations.
Yep. Thanks. Yeah, I'm not an AP in any of the specific categories, but the kind of the base level green associate.
Good.
So the hope is that at some point maybe we'll have maybe we'll find it worthwhile to look into neighborhood design or LEED for cities, and if so, I'd like to feel like I'm able to support that.
Absolutely.
Really looking forward to seeing this. Thanks, Phil, for all your work.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Phil.
Nice work, Phil.
Nice work, Phil. Let's keep moving. I know we're at 7:55, so we're still
35 minutes.
35 now. We're tracking behind. Hopefully we can pick up some speed, but we did have a little buffer here.
You're such an optimist.
Let's keep moving. Old business now. Item 5A, the proposed USGS monitoring station on Swan Creek, which we had a guest speaker last time that talked a little bit about it and kind of brought me up to speed. I wasn't really too familiar with it, and there was a lot of good stuff that maybe we've raised over it. So Ron seemed like he knew a little bit more about it, and so I think it'd be a good time for Ron to maybe just talk a little bit about what he's done with it, or if you had something else planned, Ron.
No, I've got a little presentation. I put together some things, and hopefully I'll get some help from Gabrielle as well, because she's been involved too. So can I share my screen? Share screen. Click desktop. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Share. Oh, come on. Oh, share. Okay.
I think when you hit share screen, and then you'll get a pop-up, and in the lower right-hand corner of that pop-up, you'll see share. So click that, and then I think it should work.
Okay. Share screen. Desktop. Share.
There we go.
How about? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, since our last meeting, as was mentioned, that Mike Rupiper from CARPC came in and gave a presentation on the need for the monitoring station at Swan Creek, and a lot of that was based upon the recommendations based upon this report that was done in 2018 by UW folks at Nelson Institute of Limnology. And so it was an excellent report about what's occurring in the watershed and what's going into the Wabisa wetlands and Lake Wabisa. And so he gave it a recommendation basing, that the CARPC does support this monitoring station. Just to give you an idea where the station is located at, I mean, here's the city of Fitchburg up here. The area down here in red, off of Layler Road, is where Swan Creek is at. I actually am a volunteer stream monitor for the Rock River Coalition, and so this actually is my station that I sample for them on a monthly basis, and I've been doing that for the last 3.5 years. So you can see the proximity to the Fitchburg. You know, here's a new development out at Terra Versa, and a lot of the other areas that close. I'm not sure exactly where the city line is, but is it along Lake Farm Road here or close to that area? Anyone know? Because I would believe the station's in the town of Dunn. Do you know, Claudia?
I do know it's in the town of Dunn, the
Okay.
station location.
You know, the city of Fitchburg's right by, and Swan Creek, you know, it drains the, let me pull up this other figure. You know, the Swan Creek watershed, as you can see here, this is this area up in here. It drains most of the southeastern portion of Fitchburg. So Swan Creek has its headwaters in the Fitchburg area, in the city limits. The monitoring station, again, is right down in this area down through here. Also, another creek that flows through the Wabisa wetlands, which is just the end of Lake Wabisa, is Murphy's Creek. So it drains some portions of the Fitchburg area as well. So on this figure over here, you can see the Terra Vista neighborhood that's under construction, and the other areas for future development that both impacts both of these watersheds. So out of all this, this is actually the location here where I sample. This is on the west side of Layler Road, looking west, and this is on the east side of Layler Road. On the other side of Layler Road, looking east. I actually monitor in this location. My samples are collected here. It might be the rebar right there, where I have a temperature gauge that's there year round. So that's where I actually collect my water samples from. So I think this is a 72-inch culvert, I'm not sure, but it's a very big culvert. So when the UW folks were sampling the stream in 2018, which provided information for their report, they had their monitoring station, kind of like a USGS monitoring station on this side of the creek here. USGS is planning probably to put it on this side. They'd rather be upstream of this culvert. And on this side of the road, there is also a power, so they could get power from the power lines from there to run their sampler. So it'd be a lot better for them to have it on this side of Layla Road. So this is something what USGS are proposing in terms of a monitoring station, what it typically looks like. They vary in shapes and sizes. The ones that we'll be having will be bigger because it'll have a refrigerated cooler at the bottom. That's why we need power to it. So they're recommending that this portion of here would sit on top of a larger cooler device. So that's where the samples would be stored. So I've been talking with Todd Stuntbeck at USGS, and he's been providing me some information. He actually sent over today, and I think you got a copy of it, Gabrielle, the cost estimate breakdown for the station. And I'll go over that with you a little bit here. But essentially what they're going to be doing, they're going to be monitoring flow at this station, temperature, conductivity, rainfall. They're also going to use the information they collect from the conductivity and the chloride samples to develop some type of a relationship between those two, which I'll talk about in a little bit. They're going to monitor total suspended solids, total phosphorus, dissolved phosphorus, and chlorides. The cost of this for both the installation and monitoring is $35,000 total. The first year cost is $15,000 just for the installation, so that's a one-time cost. The USGS will kick in, as Mike mentioned last time, the 25% of this cost, whereas the city or other partners would pay 75% of the cost. This is a breakdown of the installation costs. Equipment installation, $15,000. The equipment and gauging would be kind of similar to other gauging stations in Dane County. The county would also include a sensor for water level management to collect the sample. So what's going to happen is that when the flow comes up in the river, an automatic sampler will kick on to take a water sample at a certain flow level in the creek. They're assuming that local assistance with the installation. The town has expressed that they could provide some assistance with their people to put the station in, and also potentially provide some type of staffing to help get it wired and connected to the electrical power lines that are run across the site. The other major cost for is the sampling and analysis. That's around $5,500 a year, and it's based upon collecting 80 water samples that will be analyzed for total phosphorus and total suspended solids. And then 15 water samples for each for chloride and dissolved phosphorus. So those will be collected separately, but it's part of this process. Again, we'll have flow, temperature, and conductivity, by the minute. The rest of the costs for the $20,000, that's part of the sampling and maintenance, goes down to USGS. Will go out and maintain the site, check on it, make sure it's working effectively, calibrate any instruments that need it, because a lot of these instruments will need monthly calibration, so they'll be out there checking on those, just ensure the equipment is working properly. And then they'll work closely with folks who will be able to help them pick up some of the samples and take and deliver them to the USGS office. Myself, Steve Schooler from the Friends of the Wabisa Wetlands and the town of Dunn, we all would be available to go out and help pick up these samples. We also can be available to help train people who would be interested to go out and collect these samples and take them to the USGS office. So what type of data will we be getting with this information? Well, we'll be getting daily and sub-daily 15-minute time step discharge data. We'll get, like I said before, water temperature, conductivity, and rainfall. We'll get the total suspended solids. Total suspended solids is the amount of sediment that's floating in the water. I want to say floating, that's suspended in the water in the creek itself. It kind of identifies how much sediment's coming down the stream. We'll also get total phosphorus, chloride, orthophosphate, or dissolved phosphorus in the water samples. We'll also be able to get estimates on daily loading in pounds of phosphorus and suspended sediments going into Wabisa wetlands and Lake Wabisa. And then the other thing is that they'll be able to develop a relationship between electroconductivity, which is down here at the bottom, and chloride. So they don't have to take chloride measurements every time. So what that happens is that when they go out, we'll be collecting conductivity, electroconductivity daily, or every 5 or 15 minutes, and they'll develop this relationship. So in the future, when they say, well, the electroconductivity was around 300, they say, well, that's probably approximately around between 60 and 70 milligrams per liter of chloride. So they'll be able to have that information that gives us a more robust database to work with. Okay, so CARPC just passed a resolution supporting the establishment of this station. Mike Piper just sent that out just recently. The Lake Wabisa Conservation Association adopted a resolution to support this station. They're also willing to kick in $2,000 towards sampling in 2021. And we'll work with Wisconsin DNR to get some surface water grants for the following years. So they're willing to kick in $2,000. The town of Dunn, we've been working with them. Actually, Steve Schooler from the Wabisa Wetlands has been interacting with them. They're willing to commit $5,000 for installation of this station, and we'll commit on an annual basis $2,000 towards sampling. They also have staff who could help install the monitoring station and help reduce costs and assist in retrieving the samples. Right now, we're working with other partners to try to get some assistance from them in terms of funding. Friends of Wabisa Wetlands, they haven't figured out how much they can contribute yet, but they're working on that. We've been in contact with the Yahara Lakes Association, working with them to get some funding from them. Clean Lakes Alliance, and we're also waiting to hear back from the Village of McFarland on how much they would contribute. So we've been pretty active in the last month trying to find funding partners. So we don't have a lot. So the city of Fitchburg isn't picking up the full amount of this station, putting this cost in. So some of the things to think about, people have been asking me as we've been talking with them, can we use stormwater fees to help pay for future costs of the station that, go towards the sampling part of it and the operations and maintenance. I think it would be good to work with DNR to see if we can get some surface water grants to help pay for the monitoring portion of it. And then there's kind of unknown out there about Dane County and what they can support, since they're already supporting other stations in the county. So that's where we are up to date in terms of what we've been involved in, or I've been involved in, trying to help, get this station in place and trying to find funding for the station. And Gabrielle, do you have anything else to add to this?
Yeah, well, first, just thank you so much for all this fantastic work. I've been blown away by the amount of work you've done with all of our partners in such a short amount of time. I did have a chance to speak with our finance director, and my understanding was that one of the main reasons why it was not included in this budget was the desire to find other funding partners. So the fact that we were able to put together these commitments on such a short time period, I think goes a long way towards making this happen. Also did clarify that stormwater utility rates can be used to support this station, as far as I'm from her perspective. So I don't think there'll be an issue with that. It's really just a matter of looking at the budget, getting a sense of what the different commitments will be, and also having a sense. I think it's going to be important for the finance discussion at the meeting about being clear that we can support this long term, because we don't want to create a situation where we're putting in a station and we're not really able to fund it long term. So I think having these, the town of Dunn make that commitment to support it consistently, and the possibility of having the Friends of, what is it, the Wabisa Lake wetlands?
Lake Wabisa Conservation Association.
The Lake Wabisa Conservation, the fact that they can help us obtain surface water grants, I think that partnership is gonna be great, because it's gonna help alleviate staff to make that happen and make it much more reasonable. So I feel good about this. I would encourage, Ron has been great. We've been getting a lot of feedback already from people that are, that this is important to them, which is very impressive in my opinion. And finalizing the amendment in the next couple of days, and we'll put it in, and looking forward to seeing what happens. But any of you here in this committee, or anyone that's listening out there, if this is something that's important to you, I would encourage you to be a part of the process. And the really important moment is going to be the final vote on November 10th, when we vote on that amendment. But any feedback before then to the council, it all plays into that conversation. We'll have a big conversation in early November at the committee of the whole meeting. But the vote will be on November 10th.
Yeah.
So
Tamara Kickmeyer, who's the president of the LWCA, will be there tomorrow providing testimony, as well as Steve Schooler from Friends of Wabisa Wetlands. And they've also sent out emails to all their members to write the Common Council, alder people, persons, and the mayor. So,
yeah, we've been getting them. It's great.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
First of all, a little background. I'm sorry I missed Mike Rupiper. Mike Rupiper is the person who asked me to serve on RCC. So he left the city within the first year that I was on RCC, but I would say about 10 years ago, I was doing the stream monitoring out there. We didn't start on Layla Road. We started on some private property and later moved to Layla Road. And then in conjunction with the Rock River Coalition, I think that's when, I don't know if you've worked with Nancy Sheehan, she's not there anymore, but she was coordinating volunteers. And so I'm thinking that some of that information that was gathered, some of the stream sampling, should be useful to determine. I know the discussion from the last meeting was with the development that happened. Has that had a degrading impact on Swan Creek and further downstream. And I'm thinking that some of the monitoring that we've done in the last decade should be able to answer some of those questions. But more to the point, I remember when the developer brought this to Fitchburg and also to Carpsey, and I thought, and the Friends of Wabisa, I think it was the Friends of Wabisa, not the Wabisa Coalition that you just mentioned. They really worked hard to get some stipulations in with the development, and I thought the developer was required to do some monitoring. Now, so you might, I don't know if the developer did do monitoring or if that requirement is in there, but if it is, then maybe the developer will kick in some money to get this done. Because I mean, obviously you're doing it as Ron, as a volunteer, and like I said, that should be in the city records, Claudia. I'm sure you have lots of time to dig that out, but
I can do some research into that. I'll look that up and I'll send that to the RCC.
And how about, Ron, is the Rock River Coalition willing to pay anything toward this sampling?
You know, I haven't approached them about that, but I can ask them. That's a good idea. Let me contact them.
Now, I know that they paid for a lot of the equipment when we got a little bit more advanced, so I'm assuming that, you know, they'd be really interested in this.
Yeah,
It sort of takes the need for your continued sampling. It eliminates that, doesn't it? Because
let's see. No, because I'm also collecting other parameters outside of what's being collected there now, like dissolved oxygen,
okay,
transparency. It could be upgraded that because right now, then I can start collecting macroinvertebrates samples, stuff like that, which I don't do right now. So there could be a change to that as well, which would be good because it gives an indication how the biological community is doing in the stream. They might switch me over to that. So
good. Okay.
Just one quick question. I mean, I don't know, as a group, can we make a recommendation or a motion that we approve or support this, or is that something that's not something that we can't do? And it'd be nice if we could have that in our minutes that the commission supports this or don't. So.
Well, I think the sampling is critical. I think it needs to be done, and you know, I don't know that we'll be able to say, well, this development has degraded the wetlands, but that's a very important area, and I think it needs to be done. And I, for one, think that this group should support that. As far as how much money this Fitchburg can spend, I mean, I'm not ready to say anything about that until we know what the partners are willing to do, but I think everybody should get on board with this because this is a critical wetlands.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's some discussion we can have at a later meeting where we would have, adjust stormwater fees that could, encompass the cost for having the station in place.
So I will say that our next meeting is the day before the final vote on the amendment. So if we did want to do some sort of formal recommendation, I don't know what that process looks like, so I can't speak to that. But we would have time before the next meeting to put something together on it prior to that final vote. But if this body wants to make a recommendation to council, I do think that there's some power in that. So aside from you all as individuals coming to testify, I just don't know the process. I don't know if you or Claudia or Phil have any idea, but maybe we can do some research because we do have time before the final vote.
Mm-hmm. And before that final vote, we'll have some better understanding of the other financial partners.
If we could outline how much it costs and who's going to pay for what, and where that leaves Fitchburg, and maybe the people that we still are contacting but haven't heard from. I think that would be extremely helpful. Not to give you more work, because what you've done in a short period of time is absolutely amazing. I really appreciate your presentation and the work that you put into this.
Oh, well, thank you. No problem.
Yeah, Ron, you've really been a driving force on this, so I want to commend your efforts as well. That was a great presentation, and having contact with all these other organizations. I mean, this is how these types of things happen. It takes some lonely hours putting together presentations and making calls and following up with people. But thank you for doing all that. I mean, that's what that passion kind of comes through to make these things a reality. If there's not that person having that happen, then, this could get, brushed aside because there's a lot of other budget priorities out there in, our community, but I think you're really making it happen. So thank you.
Ron, have you been in contact with Phyllis Hasbrook?
With who?
Phyllis Hasbrook?
No, I don't.
Well, she made a lot of things happen. The Friends of Wabisa wetlands. So maybe Steve Schooler knows her.
Okay, I'll ask Steve. I mean, Steve has been doing a lot, also coordinating, getting the town of Dunn involved in this. So a lot of credit goes for him getting the funding from Dunn.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, great presentation, Ron. Really good images. Kind of puts a circle around everything. I do like the point of the whole reason this is here is because builders are here and they're the ones potentially causing it. So yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile to see how they can contribute. But I think we can all kind of agree that our commission's in agreement with this. I don't know how much that means, and I think we do have some work to do that we can put something together before next meeting. But I can safely say we're all in agreement with this project.
Yeah, definitely. Great work.
Thank you.
So good.
So it's something we want to wait till the next meeting till we make a kind of a vote or a recommendation from this commission.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we can make a formal approval. I mean, I think.
Why don't we wait, since Gabriella said that there was time, and we'll be able to pull the numbers together and know what we're looking at. I think that would be better.
Yep. And I think it'd be more powerful if we have whatever that official process might be, if we have to put together some sort of resolution or statement that's official from the committee. So
great.
Okay.
All right, big action item for next time, but that sounds good. Let's keep moving. It's 8:20. We're a little bit more behind now, but I think we can catch up.
I don't want to be timekeeper anymore.
It's always a tough job.
I resign.
I think we can kind of pick up the pace, mostly because 5B virtual events. To be honest, I haven't made much headway. Chris, I don't know if you've done anything outside of my knowledge.
Yeah, well, leave it to an old RCC chair to try to get us back on track with our timing. I think, with the virtual events, we did have a meeting between the Tree Diversity Planning Committee and then also the RCC Community Outreach Subcommittee on Sustainability. And so we did have that initial meeting last week, and we're planning to have another meeting next month. I don't know if it'll time out before the RCC meeting or not. I think that's looking like it's going to be on November 9th. So it'll be pretty close, but I think we're on to, a very good idea with this. I don't know exactly how virtual it'll be at this point. We're kind of in the brainstorming stages. So we gotta gather a lot of information on kind of why this is important. And then just kind of threw out some ideas. We were missing a pretty key person. Everybody, I think, out of the people at this meeting, between Kim and Gabriella and Phil, we were all in attendance at this meeting. And then we had Jeremy from the Tree Diversity Committee. We were missing Anna Healy, and she was a pretty important piece to it. So we're hoping she can join us next time. But I think, and Diane sent me an email today, having watched the last meeting, just, being in full support of this as well. And also mentioning that the Arboretum has trees identified within it, although it's not in Fitchburg, it's another resource that we can use. So I think, right now we're just kind of pulling all the resources together and kind of thinking what this is going to look like, but it's looking like something would come out more so around Earth Month and Arbor Day next year, and that we would kind of spin it out and try to make that a bigger deal in Fitchburg than what it's been maybe in past years. So there's articles that we can write, and there's all kinds of ideas that we have. We just need to kind of, bring those kind of into a more formal plan at this point. As far as other virtual events, I think that, there still are some opportunities for us to consider doing some other virtual events. You know, since this is a little ways out, I wouldn't mind doing something over the winter months at some point. And so I think the actual community outreach subcommittee should meet, you know, on our own and just kind of continue to develop this between now and the next meeting and see if we can bring a few concrete ideas forward to that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I guess the whole idea of this is the virtual events was just to have an event, and so it's good to hear that there's definitely some single event in the works and possibly another one. So that's great. That's really good.
I don't have anything else on that unless anybody has any comments or questions.
I think it's a good idea, and thanks for your work moving forward on it.
Well, Gabriella brought it to the table, and I thought it was within a minute. I thought this was a great idea for us and something that we haven't done in the last 12 years for sure. So,
And doing it in conjunction with Earth Day, I mean, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a great collaboration. So looking forward to reporting back once we have some more details.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll keep talking about that at these meetings. Otherwise, let's move on. 5C recycling drop-off site video, which I know has been making progress. I saw an email with the invite go out. Haven't seen too much more, but maybe Claudia could update us.
Yes, and I think we can probably make up some time here. There's not too much to report. As you know, I did send out a doodle poll just to see who was interested in participating. I believe it was Ron, Kim, and Shelley who said that they were available to help out with that. So we have a meeting next Monday, I believe, to just finalize the content and brainstorm the content that we want to cover in that video. And then after that, we'll schedule a date to actually record it. We are planning to record during business hours, but we'll try to figure out a time that works for the folks who were interested in helping act in that. And if there was anyone else who was interested, I meant to have my calendar pulled up. I believe it's next Monday at 1:30 is when we were planning to meet. If anyone else was interested in joining on the commission, feel free to send me an email and I can add you to that invitation.
Have you sent that out, Claudia?
I did, yes. So you should have gotten it. It was an Outlook meeting invite, similar to how we do the RCC meetings.
Okay, I have to check my email again.
And I just confirmed it is next Monday at 1:30. All right, well, that's all I had to report on that.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for the update. Hopefully you don't have to trudge around all the brush that's coming in these days. All right. Let's keep moving to 5D Fitchburg Star articles. We still have a couple on the docket here. We have Gabrielle for November, Chris for December, and Ron for January. Are you guys still thinking about those articles?
Yep.
I just sent you an email, Nate, about the specs for the November article since I'm up next. So
Perfect.
I think I'm thinking about writing about stormwater since we've been having a lot of these conversations. So
Great.
Good idea.
Working on it, but thinking through it. But I'll have something.
I'll get back to you.
And I think, just for those that didn't see it, Jeremy from the Tree Diversity Committee did have an article in the most recent Fitchburg Star that came out. So you probably got that within the last few days. So I'd encourage people that haven't seen that article yet to check it out. Talks about the value of young oaks.
You're right.
Cool. All right. Yeah, and then like I said, I'll probably want to write an article sometime next year, and I'm sure other people have one in mind too. So I think we're good on star articles for now. Again, reach out if you have any questions or need additional thoughts. we're all here to help. How about back to you, Chris, 5E Community Outreach Subcommittee update. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think, just to reiterate, I think the Community Outreach Subcommittee will try to meet between now and the next meeting, talk about other ideas for virtual events, and then, if we do have another meeting with the Tree Diversity Committee, we'll report back on that. Just in terms of updates on Aldo Leopold recycling, so the Carton Council did get back to Sustain Dane, which we're kind of involved with because they are still doing work at or plans to do work at Aldo Leopold, where we've had a pretty strong volunteer engagement in their recycling program. And all indications are that that grant is going to come through in the coming days. And so the next steps with that, the first thing that we want to do is right now there's a bunch of meals that are coming to the schools, and they get packed up as like 10 meals that go home to different families each week. And so we want to get some type of educational piece in there about the importance of recycling your cartons and then other possible things to recycle. So plastics in there. And then we want to try to do a tease for when they do come back to in-person schooling, that this is something that we want to work on inside the school. But this is something that we're planning to send out, not just to Aldo Leopold, but we want to get it out distributed to the entire MMSD school district. They said that would be pretty easy to do add-on into those packages. So we've already talked to Food and Nutrition at MMSD about that. So that's on tap before students probably come back to school, is to at least kind of get the ball rolling again on that and keeping the message going out and trying to keep this whole thing moving forward slowly but surely.
That's a great idea, Chris. And I think a lot of people don't even realize those cartons are recyclable, but by putting it in this packet of meals going out, the parents will become aware, or the whoever's taking care of the children will become aware of the recyclability of these. I think that's a great idea.
So, I think who's ever interested, I know obviously Kim and Diane have been pretty involved with the volunteer aspects of this project. So I wouldn't mind getting some of your thoughts on that cut sheet or flyer, as we start to develop that.
Good. Happy to help.
Sounds good.
That's all I've got.
Sounds good. Thanks for the update.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, we're a little back on track here. Only 15 minutes behind, so thanks everybody for picking it up.
I think your clock might be off. I have that we're still a half hour off. But go ahead.
Sure. Oh, sure. Item 6, council update.
Yes, so it'll be a little shorter this time. Just a small note, Claudia invited me along to come see the burn pond retrofit that's underway, and then also do some groundwater testing at the Sub-Zero kettle, where we're doing the pumping and testing to see how we can handle stormwater in that area. And it was an absolute blast. So thank you so much, Claudia. I had a lot of fun.
No problem. Thanks for your help. I made Gabriella do all the work. I was like, you're here. You can do this.
What did you learn from that?
It was a joy. Claudia was just explaining the value of the retrofit for the burn pond and how it's really going to help with infiltration and water quality. It's a really interesting project, and I need to write up a blog post about it because I haven't done that yet, but I thought it was fantastic and very fascinating. And then for the Sub-Zero kettle, it was really just a quick walk around the kettle and checking the groundwater. She showed me how we actually do the groundwater measurement. And that is very much outstanding in terms of the results of it, because the pumping has just started, and then monitoring how the groundwater changes over time. So that Sub-Zero kettle, which is right near the Lacey and Seminole intersection, is part of the stormwater management plan for that area. So it's to understand that is going to be a very important thing to do in order to understand that, because that area is growing quite rapidly. So,
Claudia, do you think that kettle is now permanently, well, maybe not permanently, semi-permanently wet because of all the impervious surface that has been built up in the last 3 years?
So I've heard a couple theories as to why why the kettle is full of water now when in the past it hasn't been. One factor, of course, is that we have been having record rainfall in the last few years. Another factor is that area used to be tilled, and actually when you till the land, it helps with infiltration, and when you grow crops, that also helps with transpiration as well. I also did hear from one long-term employee of the city that he thought that area was pumped in the past. So that is hearsay, but that was his recollection. And he's been with the city for, I think, 20 years. So I'm not sure if that's true, but if it has been pumped in the past, then clearly it was never infiltrating properly. But then certainly with development, more water will be sent that way than in the past. So those are a lot of things that can happen. Another thing that can happen is when you have a kettle where you're relying on infiltration, the soils can clog up as you're sending more water. The water gets there, and then obviously the dirt settles out into the kettle, and that can cause clogging of the soil. I have heard of instances where that has happened, and the area has been permanently clogged, and and then the only option is to pump, really, when you have that option, when you have that happen. So there are a lot of things that could be causing it. But I guess we don't really know which factor it is, or if it's a combination of all of the factors that I mentioned, which is causing it to fail.
I really look forward to hearing the results of that.
If you go to Google Earth, if you look at the historical imagery going back to 1992, you can see most of the time it was just regular farm field. It just wasn't until recently that it was a standing body of water. It was kind of amazing to see the change.
All right, so I guess I'll jump back in if that's all right with everyone. So we also did, as Jonathan, our person that testified at the very beginning, he was a part of that South McKee Park neighborhood meeting that we had at the end of September, which was very informative. That area has a lot of water concerns. So as we've talked, we already covered that quite a bit, but I'm looking forward to having more conversations about potential solutions for that area. We had another tree advisory committee meeting, and we are moving forward with the tree ordinance, and we set a goal to have it complete by the end of next calendar year. So I'm hoping to update you all relatively frequently, as often as I have updates, because I think definitely aligns with this committee. And then transportation and transit, I'm also on that committee. We had a meeting last week, and we had a good conversation about public transportation and the future of that. And there is strong interest in that committee for that committee to be a part of working on a public hearing. So we're going to move towards working on that, and hopefully that's forthcoming early next year at the latest. The earlier the better, in my opinion. And then the final thing is just going to be budget. So tomorrow is council meeting. It's the first public hearing on the budget. And this is really just for anybody that wants to comment on it in any way, shape, or form. I'm already working on amendments, but they are due on Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. So it's a very tight deadline. And then, so I will be submitting some of those. And then the whole rest of the process is really just the council meeting at the committee of the whole meeting to discuss in depth, and then also the final vote on November 10th. So we've talked about it a little bit. I think I sent out the budget calendar to y'all earlier on, but I do encourage y'all to put November 10th on your calendar. 7:30 p.m. Right at the beginning is the public hearing. And I think it'll be really interesting. And the budget is just really fascinating. We also, I guess one other thing, we also had finance committee presentations, which was over 2 nights, and each of the departments had a chance to walk through their budget requests for the general fund. So The capital projects are a separate section because that was approved through the CIP process, but all the general fund requests. And so if you're interested in any particular department, it's fascinating because you can look at the agenda and kind of pick out which one you want and jump forward into the presentation just to that specific one. But even if you look in the budget document, there's a great summary sheet for each one where they just talk about the accomplishments for the year and what they're looking forward to next year. So it's a great summary of the different departments in the city. So just for anyone that's interested in how the city works, it's pretty fascinating. And I'll actually, for anyone that's interested, I did put up a blog post on my website, GabrielaGerhardt.com, about the budget. And I can drop that in the comments for you all, but obviously for anyone that's just watching, if you go to GabrielaGerhardt.com, you can find that blog post. And that's all for me, unless you have any questions.
Hopefully those last the next meetings won't take as long as the last ones did, 2:31.
I probably will.
I'm hoping for the committee of the whole, I requested that we start earlier because we typically don't start that meeting until 7 p.m., but there's no real reason to that long. So we're going to start earlier. Just in
Start
case.
at lunch.
As early as possible.
Thank you, Gabriela.
There's actually one more important detail that I forgot to mention. I am planning to request that we increase the number of RCC meetings. I think we're funded for 8 a year, and I was going to request to move it up till 10, so we can have just a couple months throughout the year. But given the fact that our agendas are so jam-packed every month, I figure it justifies an increased number of meetings. And I did want to kind of test the waters and see if you all are okay with that proposal, because that's the current plan.
You know, I think that's great. It gives us a little bit of flexibility. If we don't have anything to meet on, we just don't have the meeting. But at least it's there if we need it. You're right, our agendas are jam-packed, and they have been since our meeting. A number of meetings were reduced, and as a result of fewer meetings, we're less involved. Things are not referred to us because we're not meeting. I mean, it's just kind of snowballed. So I appreciate that you did that.
And Claudia and Phil, obviously it requires more time of you to staff them. So if you have any issues with that, you can talk to me now, or we can connect afterward as well.
Would that mean that we would then not have as jam-packed of agendas if we did that? Because I would be all in favor of that, because I feel like sitting in front of a Zoom meeting for 3 hours after doing that all day full-time for work is a huge commitment. And I feel like a lot of times we don't have enough time to really have thorough discussions on certain topics. Because we have to get to the next 20 items on the agenda. So I would say I would be in favor of that if we can try and cut back on the items on the agenda.
Yeah, I think it'll help both ways for sure. Both having the flexibility plus maybe the ability to stretch meeting items. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Nate, if you want some help with that, I'd be happy to look at that with you and just try to think strategically how we could potentially do that, what that plan might look like. I think some initial thoughts that are coming to my head are, things like, the Fitchburg Star articles and the community outreach, even though they haven't taken too much time and they're nice things to touch on. Maybe we can do those every other meeting if we're meeting more frequently, just kind of look for opportunities like that.
Yep.
The thing that comes to mind is just kind of what 2 months would we take off, so I think December has been one that is probably still a good one to take off just because that's such a busy month for everybody between the holidays. Maybe not as busy this year, but most years. And then April is our really busy month for all the events that we're typically involved with. So those would be the 2 months that kind of come to mind for me out of the gates. As
We should probably wait to see if this even gets approved.
right.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely write to your alders. So if you're interested in this, I would encourage you to reach out as a Fitchburg.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think I have no problems with that. So
Great, and that's all for me.
great, thank you. Moving on to staff update.
All right, so let me share my screen. Solid waste update. So the environmental engineering intern, Hannah, she's been working on recycling outreach material, and I'm also going to have her work on updating the Fitchburg recycling guide. I've also been having her help out deliver leaf-free street signs, and she's been helping with collecting groundwater data in some weeks. She's been helping out with that. So that's what we've been doing there. Stormwater update, the burn pond retrofit is currently under construction. It's pretty far along. And this was really cool. This was a photograph that was provided by the resident who lives directly adjacent to the pond. Well, it used to be a dry pond. Now it's a multi-area facility. But it's really cool because it was taken during a storm event. So you can see the area, the different areas within the basin in action. So this area up front, just for, I guess, orientation, water comes into the facility in a culvert somewhere over here. You can't see it in the photo. And then it exits on the other side. So water comes into this, what we're calling a dry forebay. So water will pond in here temporarily. And then there's a berm at the end, and there are a few gabions that go through that berm that allow water to seep through the rocks. And then there's a level spreader on the other side, which causes the water to spread out, and then it continues downstream. There's another level spreader here. And then at the very end, there's a bioretention basin. So all of these three distinct areas will be native seeded. This has already been seeded. The downstream bioretention area will get seeds and plugs, and then this upstream forebay area, which has the most water erosive velocities, will actually be getting the vegetated mat. There is one area towards the culvert, which, so what you're seeing here is the temporary ponding. So this entire area is designed to pond temporarily, and then water will escape through those gabions. But there's an area, a smaller area near the culvert that unfortunately is ponding for longer than we originally anticipated, because there was basically a grade bust on the invert of the pipe coming into the basin. So there is a small area that pools here. So that's something that that staff is taking a look at and seeing what we can do to fix that issue. But yeah, other than that, I think it's looking really great. It's functioning as designed. I thought this was really cool to see the basin in action there.
Claudia, where is that?
So Burn Park is over here. It's basically to the southwest of City Hall. I can probably pull it up real quick.
Is it part of Burn Park?
South subdivision area,
It's right here.
Richardson.
Okay, so it's part of the park.
No, it's in a separate lot.
Okay.
So this is the park lot that's been dedicated for park purposes, and this is a separate lot that's been dedicated for stormwater purposes.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
mhm. All right. And then EOR has been working on the Lake Barney study. A presentation occurred on September 23rd, and a video of that presentation can be found here. We basically just went into some details on how the cost benefit analysis is going to be conducted and provided some background information and the approach that we'll be using. And the next steps are to complete all of the cost benefit components to that. As Gabriella mentioned, pumping of the pond at sub-zero has commenced and we are collecting groundwater data weekly. That's been going on for, I believe, about 6 weeks now. And actually last week we did stop pumping just because we've basically gotten all of the water that we can out of the pond with the amount of hose that we have available. So we are going to be looking at analyzing that data at this point. So that's something that Strand is working on now.
Bobby, if I could just interrupt and go back to the Lake Barney study.
Oh, sure.
I listened to your presentation to the committee of the whole, and I thought you did a terrific job. The two people, well, primarily the man who presented with you, did a nice job of explaining things, but yours was more sort of 101 for the layperson. I thought you did a really nice job explaining the language.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for that feedback. I did think it was important before we go into applying all of these high level concepts to get us all on the same page.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Great. Well, thank you. And we do have an upcoming public information meeting for the Fitrona Road and Goose Lake project, which is scheduled to occur this Wednesday from 6 to 7. And if you're interested in attending that, you can register online by going to this website here. So that's what I had, and I will hand it off to Phil for the sustainability update.
All right, mine should be pretty quick. The Badger State Trail Bridge over McKee Road opened 2 weeks ago on September 30th. So the trail's now fully open from the bike roundabout down south through Fitchburg. The opening was on Broadcast and Fact TV. It's on YouTube. It was on a couple of local news sites. So there were plenty of opportunities to hear about that. This is now the third major bike and pedestrian overpass bridge we have in Fitchburg, which is pretty impressive. We have the Military Ridge State Trail Bridge going over McKee, now this Badger State Trail Bridge, and also Cap City Trail going over Fish Hatchery Road. So if you like walking or biking, go seek out the bridge. It's pretty cool. The Wisconsin Public Service Commission has officially approved MG&E's and EDF Renewables contracts with MG&E's contracts with some of their customers. So the O'Brien Solar Fields projects can finally get underway. With that approval, it is still slated to start this fall and be operational next spring. I put these in reverse order of big news. Should have flipped these. Cycle September concluded at the end of last month. The City of Fitchburg team ranked first among similar-sized government and public services teams in the Madison area. Fitchburg was also 4th overall in the Madison area and 14th in the country for our size category. Special recognition for Diane, who was 4th on the Fitchburg team in terms of overall points, and I believe third in terms of miles ridden.
Oh, it wasn't even a good month for bike riding as far as I'm concerned. So we need to get more people out there.
Yeah.
I mean, my bike rides were so short, it was embarrassing.
That's all I got.
Nate, before you adjourn, I have a couple things.
Sure.
At the August RCC meeting, 2 meetings ago anyway, I think I mentioned that Quarry Ridge had some nice stormwater features in their development plan, and they did, as I recall, they did. So I took a bike ride over there, and that was before the September event, Phil, so you don't even have that mileage. But anyway, I took a ride over there, and apparently this development plan came to RCC, and I remember the developer came, and we were commending him for everything that he included. So when I went over there, I was shocked and quite disappointed to see that the things that I thought were going to be included in the development were not there. I mean, if you, in fact, I was really embarrassed. I even brought it up in the RCC meeting because if anybody goes over there thinking, oh, this community has a lot of good stormwater plans or features, they don't. Some of the ones that were intended aren't functioning the way they were supposed to, and like I said, I'm pretty disappointed, and I don't know who is responsible for following up to see that those things are actually implemented. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you, don't be rushing over there to see what kind of an example that is, because it's not a good example of stormwater at all. And the other thing that I had, I took we went to the recycling drop-off site on Labor Day weekend, and I saw all the actually polystyrene and cardboard just stacked outside of all of those bins. Claudia, is it possible to get a bigger, rather than having so many little cardboard containers that don't seem to fit the cardboard very well? Is it possible to just get a couple big ones where, I mean, if somebody puts a box in and they don't collapse it and the hole isn't that big to stick things in, it just sort of fills up without filling all the spaces. Is it possible to just get bigger roll-offs for cardboard?
I can look into that. I can look into that and what the cost implications would be. If we had a bigger container, I worry that it would be a similar problem. Folks would try to put it in through one hole, and then, you know, with cardboard, I feel like that's going to happen, that there are going to be areas that
can't be an open container.
You don't really want an open container for cardboard because you don't want your cardboard getting soaking wet. If it gets moldy, then it's no longer recyclable.
You know, Dane County has theirs outside. Their cardboard.
Yeah, I guess I'm not familiar with how they're set up, or if they, yeah, I'm not sure why that's the case, but that was my understanding, is that if cardboard gets moldy, it's no longer recyclable. Okay. So that was my understanding of why you usually want a lid on cardboard containers.
Maybe we should just encourage people, if they're going to the drop-off with cardboard, to cut it into smaller pieces, because I suspect many of those that are being hauled away are only partially full because it's just being blocked. That's how the polystyrene was. If you shift around a couple pieces of polystyrene, there's actually a lot of space. But anyway, that's all I had. Thank you.
Would it be helpful for us to come up with some type of sticker or some type of map that we could put on, signage that we could put on the side of those to tell people to break it down? Something that
I know there is already a sticker that says break down your cardboard boxes. We could look into signage for asking folks to cut it up too.
Maybe
I'm not that hopeful with compliance.
Yeah.
Though.
Maybe
Part of the video, right?
Video, yeah.
Yeah, I think the video will be cool, and we can show how it should be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've been kind of urging or itching for a discussion topic about the amount of cardboard that's out there these days, and I haven't really wrapped my head around what we talk about, but it's definitely an issue, right? I mean, we have 10 dumpsters now, and they're always still full anyway. So I don't know, if you see that meeting topic in the future, that'll be why.
Yeah, and I know we included in the operating budget for next year funding for 2 more dumpsters out there, which would be serviced 5 times a week. So hopefully that would help. But yeah, as of now, aside from signage and outreach, there's not a whole lot that can be done because there's no funding currently to add additional dumpsters.
Well, the problem I saw was the dumpsters, there was no place to put any more cardboard, so people were just leaving it on the side. And I don't know how often that happens. I don't know how much in advance before Labor Day those dumpsters were emptied, but if they're just, and there was not a small quantity on the side, there was quite a bit. Your staff probably could tell you because they probably had to pick it up. And I'm sure that got wet or Pelletieri had to stack it. I'm not sure what happened with it, but those little containers, maybe a bigger one would help a little bit.
All right, any other thoughts? Otherwise, next meeting we tentatively had for the second Monday of November, November 9th at 6:30. There's all the different ways to watch the meeting. If you want to participate, that'd be good. I wonder if maybe I'll have to talk with Scott at the end of this, if there's maybe a way to get a heads up on if there's going to be a public appearance, just to help kind of budget or prepare for the meeting.
I might be the best one to do that, just because from time to time people say that they're gonna be coming, so I can be better about letting you know in advance.
Oh, that's all right. Oh, that's good. And yeah, the council chambers is open if anyone wants to come into person. I know I'm nice and comfortable at home, but any other thoughts? All right, I'll adjourn this meeting at 8:58.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.